A millionaire hosts a beggar woman with a baby eye in his house, but the next day he is shocked. Arthur Prescott, a wealthy but isolated businessman, encounters Eloise, a struggling mother, and her young daughter, Sophia, outside his opulent Los Angeles estate. Struck by their plight, Arthur's perspective on wealth and purpose shifts as he invites them into his home. Their lives begin to intertwine, setting the stage for a transformative journey. Will Arthur's efforts to bridge the gap between his privileged world and Eloise's reality lead to meaningful change, or will their differences prove insurmountable? The sun hung high in the clear blue sky, casting its warm rays over the sprawling estate of Arthur Prescott. A man of considerable wealth and influence, Arthur was accustomed to the luxuries that life afforded him. His mornings typically began with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee wafting through the air, mingling with the sound of his personal chef preparing breakfast. Today, however, as he stepped out onto the marble balcony of his luxurious mansion, a faint unease prickled at the edge of his consciousness. Arthur adjusted his tailored suit, the fabric soft against his skin, and took a moment to appreciate the meticulously landscaped gardens that surrounded his home. The vibrant colors of blooming roses and the delicate rustle of palm trees swaying in the gentle breeze typically brought him solace. Yet, something about the day felt different, as if the universe was subtly urging him to pay attention. As he descended the grand staircase, the sound of his polished shoes echoed through the vast hallways, a stark reminder of his solitary existence. He had built a life filled with success. His name was synonymous with power in the business world, but it had come at a cost. Friends were few, and the laughter that once filled his home had long been replaced by the sterile silence of wealth. "Good morning, Mr. Prescott," greeted his butler, James, as Arthur entered the dining room. The table was set elegantly, with fine china and crystal glasses, reflecting the morning light. "Good morning, James," Arthur replied, forcing a smile. "Is breakfast ready?" "Just a moment, sir." "It will be served shortly," James responded, his demeanor as polished as the silverware. Arthur nodded absent-mindedly, his mind wandering as he gazed out the window. The world beyond his estate was unfamiliar to him, a world filled with people he seldom interacted with, a world of struggles and hardships that he would rather ignore. Yet, in that moment, a fleeting thought crossed his mind. What if he could do something meaningful today? After finishing his breakfast, Arthur decided to take a stroll through his estate. He was walking along the path lined with flowering bushes when he noticed something unusual. His gaze was drawn to a figure sitting on the ground just beyond the gates of his property. It was a woman, disheveled and worn, with a small child in her arms. The sight struck a chord deep within him, an inexplicable urge to approach her. "Can I help you?" he called out, stepping closer. His voice, usually commanding and assertive, softened as he spoke. The woman looked up, her eyes filled with a mix of surprise and wariness. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to intrude," she stammered, clutching her child protectively. Arthur felt a pang of empathy. "You're not intruding. What's your name?" "I'm Eloise," she replied, her voice barely a whisper. "This is Sophia." She gestured to the child, who was wrapped in a thin blanket, her small face barely visible. "What brings you here, Eloise?" Arthur asked, kneeling down to her level, an unusual gesture for a man of his stature. Eloise hesitated, her gaze darting to the ground. "I lost my job a few weeks ago. We've been living in our car. I thought maybe I could find some help here, but..." Her voice trailed off, the weight of her circumstances pressing down on her. Arthur's heart ached at her words. He had always believed that hard work and determination could conquer any obstacle, but here was a living testament to the complexities of life that he had never fully understood. "You don't have to be alone in this. Would you like to come inside? I can offer you a meal and a place to rest for the night," he suggested, surprised by his own impulsiveness. Eloise looked at him, a flicker of hope igniting in her eyes. "Really? You would do that for us?" "Of course," Arthur replied, standing and extending his hand to help her up. "I insist." As they walked towards the mansion, Eloise glanced around, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Your home. It's beautiful," she murmured, taking in the pristine lawn and the grand architecture. "Thank you," Arthur said, leading her inside. "But it's just a house without the warmth of connection." He paused, realizing how hollow his words sounded in contrast to the opulence surrounding them. "Please make yourself comfortable. I'll have something prepared for you." Once inside, Eloise settled onto a plush couch while Arthur moved to the kitchen. He could hear Sophia's soft coos as the child wriggled in her mother's arms, and it struck him how fragile their situation was. Despite his wealth, he felt a growing unease about the contrast between their lives. As he prepared sandwiches and soup, Arthur couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter was meant to happen. He returned to the living room, placing the food on the coffee table. "Here you go. I hope you like it," he said, watching as Eloise carefully set Sophia down to eat. "Thank you so much, Mr. Prescott. It's more than I expected," she said, her voice trembling with gratitude. "Please call me Arthur," he replied, sitting across from her. "What happened to your job?" Eloise sighed, her eyes clouding with memories. "I worked at a local diner. It was enough to get by, but when the owner decided to close down, I lost everything. I've been trying to find another job, but it's tough." She glanced down at her daughter, her expression filled with concern. "I just want a better life for her." Arthur felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He had always viewed the world through the lens of business deals and profits, but here was a woman whose reality was far removed from his own. "I can't imagine what that must feel like," he said softly. Eloise looked up, meeting his gaze. "You've done more for us in one day than most people would do in a lifetime. It's hard to trust strangers, but you seem genuine." Arthur smiled, feeling a warmth spread through him. "Well, it's true that I've built a successful life, but I've realized that success isn't just about money. It's about making a difference." He paused, his heart racing as he considered how far he had strayed from that belief. "I want to help." As they talked, the hours slipped by unnoticed. Eloise shared stories of her life before the struggles began, and Arthur opened up about his own childhood, a time filled with ambition but lacking emotional connection. In that moment, they were no longer defined by their circumstances. They were simply two people sharing their truths. As the evening settled in, Arthur felt a heaviness in his heart. He realized he could not simply help Eloise for one night and then return to his life as usual. There was a part of him that yearned to understand her world more deeply, to go beyond the surface of his wealth and privilege. Eloise noticed the thoughtful expression on his face. "What's wrong?" she asked gently. I want to do more," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "But I don't know how." "Sometimes, just listening is enough," she replied, her eyes softening. "You've already done more than anyone else today." Arthur nodded, feeling a profound shift within himself. Perhaps this encounter was the start of something new, a path that could lead him to a purpose he had long forgotten. "Thank you for trusting me, Eloise," he said sincerely. "I hope to be worthy of that trust." As they sat together, a newfound connection blossomed between them, one that transcended the barriers of wealth and status. In that moment, Arthur Prescott began to grasp the essence of what it truly meant to be rich, not in possessions, but in compassion and understanding. Arthur Prescott stood in the expansive foyer of his mansion, the morning sun filtering through the tall windows, casting intricate patterns on the marble floor. He was a man accustomed to control, to the polished veneer of success that surrounded him. But today, something felt different. The encounter with Eloise and her child the previous day lingered in his mind like an echo refusing to fade. He walked to the grand window overlooking his meticulously manicured lawn, his thoughts drifting back to the hollow look in Eloise's eyes. The pain and desperation etched on her face had struck him profoundly, igniting a fire within him that he had long ignored. Arthur had always considered himself a generous man, donating to charities and initiating community programs. Yet he realized he had never truly engaged with the very people his donations were meant to help. Arthur, his assistant, Linda, interrupted his contemplation, stepping into the room with a clipboard in hand. "You have a meeting with the board in 15 minutes. They're eager to discuss the new investment opportunities." "Cancel it," he replied, surprising even himself with the firmness of his voice. Linda blinked in confusion. "All of them. I need to take a day for myself." "Are you feeling okay?" she asked, concern etching her features. "You never cancel meetings." "I know. I need some time. I'll reschedule everything. Please." Linda nodded, albeit hesitantly, and left the room. Arthur felt a surge of guilt for dismissing her so abruptly, but the weight of Eloise's story was too profound to ignore. He grabbed his car keys and headed out, determined to find Eloise and the little girl who had unwittingly shaken his core beliefs. The city of Los Angeles, with its glimmering skyline and bustling streets, felt like a different world as he drove through neighborhoods that were often ignored by wealthier residents. He wasn't sure where to start, but he recalled the areas he had seen during his brief search for Eloise. They were marked by the scars of poverty, boarded-up windows, graffiti-covered walls, and a palpable sense of despair. As he drove deeper into these neighborhoods, the contrast became more evident. The luxury of his life stood in stark opposition to the lives of those he passed. He saw children playing on cracked sidewalks, their laughter mingling with the distant sounds of traffic. Arthur had never understood how much joy could exist in such adversity until now. He stopped at a small park where families gathered, some sharing meals while others simply enjoyed each other's company. Arthur stepped out of his car, feeling the heat of the sun against his skin and the weight of his tailored suit. He approached a group of mothers sitting on a bench, their children playing nearby. "Excuse me," he began, his voice tentative. "Have any of you seen a woman named Eloise? She has a little girl named Sophia." The women exchanged glances, their expressions a mix of curiosity and caution. One woman, with tired eyes but a warm smile, spoke up. "Eloise? Yeah, I know her. She was staying at the shelter a few blocks over. Why do you ask?" Arthur hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to explain the connection he felt. "I met her the other day. I wanted to help her." "Help?" scoffed another woman, her tone laced with skepticism. "You mean you want to throw money at her problems?" "No, it's not like that," Arthur replied quickly. "I want to understand. I want to do something meaningful." The first woman raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "You don't look like you belong here. What's a guy like you doing in a place like this?" Arthur felt a twinge of defensiveness. "I'm just trying to learn. I realize now that I've been oblivious to the struggles people face." "Learning, huh?" the skeptical woman said, crossing her arms. "Good luck with that. Most people just want to forget about us." "Maybe that's why I'm here," Arthur said, surprising himself with his honesty. "I want to change that." The women were silent for a moment, weighing his words. Finally, the first woman spoke again. "You really care, don't you? Well, if you're looking for Eloise, you might want to check the shelter. She helps out there sometimes." "Thank you," Arthur said, relief flooding through him. He quickly left the park, his mind racing with thoughts of what he would say to Eloise when he found her. When he arrived at the shelter, the atmosphere was warm but chaotic. A line of people waited for meals, while others mingled in the common area, sharing stories and laughter. Arthur stepped inside, feeling out of place among the crowd. He approached the reception desk, a kind-faced woman behind it looking up from her paperwork. "I'm looking for Eloise," he said, his voice steady despite the nerves fluttering in his stomach. "Could you tell me where I might find her?" "Eloise? She's in the back, helping with some of the kids," the receptionist replied, gesturing toward a door. "Just follow the noise. They're probably playing." Arthur thanked her and headed toward the back. As he entered the room, he was taken aback by the sight before him. Eloise sat on the floor, surrounded by a group of children, including Sophia, her face lit with joy as she participated in a craft project. The contrast between the vibrant scene and the stark reality of their situation was striking. "Eloise," he called softly, hesitant to disrupt the moment. She turned, her expression shifting from delight to surprise. "Arthur, what are you doing here?" "I was looking for you," he replied, stepping further into the room. "I wanted to see if you were okay." "I'm good, thanks," she said, though her eyes betrayed a mixture of emotions. "What about you?" "I didn't expect to see you again." "I didn't expect to feel this way," he admitted, glancing at the children. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said. About connections." Eloise studied him, her brow furrowing slightly. "And what have you concluded?" "I was so focused on my success that I forgot what truly matters," he confessed. "I want to make a difference. I want to help, not just you, but others like you." Eloise's expression softened, but there was still a hint of skepticism. "It's not as simple as that, Arthur. People need more than just money or good intentions. I know that now, he said earnestly. I want to partner with you. I want to create something that helps women and children like you who are struggling. I have resources, but I need your insight, your experience. Eloise's eyes widened, a mixture of hope and caution flickering within them. You want to work with me? Why would you want to do that? Because I believe in what you're doing here, he replied, his voice steady. And I believe we can do more together. She looked around the room, taking in the children's laughter and the sense of community that enveloped them. It's not just about throwing money at the problem, Arthur. It's about understanding the struggles, the systemic issues that keep people trapped. I understand that now, he said, his heart racing. I want to learn from you, to understand those struggles so we can create real change. Eloise hesitated, weighing his words carefully. If you're serious about this, it's going to take a lot of work. It won't be easy. I'm ready, he said, determination flooding his voice. I've been living a life that feels empty, and I want to fill it with purpose. As Eloise considered his proposal, a spark of hope ignited within her. Perhaps, just perhaps, this could be the beginning of something transformative, not just for Arthur, but for countless others who needed support and understanding. Arthur Prescott stood in the middle of his expansive living room, his mind racing with the events of the past few days. The warmth of the sunlight streaming through the large glass windows felt foreign, a stark contrast to the cold knot of confusion and concern tightening in his chest. He had always lived in a world defined by wealth and success, but now, that world seemed unbearably hollow. What have I done? He murmured to himself, pacing back and forth. The memory of Eloise's eyes, filled with both hope and desperation, haunted him. He couldn't shake the feeling that he had failed her somehow. A sudden thought struck him: he needed to find her. He needed to understand. Without a second thought, he grabbed his coat and headed out, the door of his mansion closing behind him with a soft click that echoed in the emptiness around him. As he drove through the sleek, polished streets of Los Angeles, he felt a growing urgency. The city, with its gleaming skyscrapers and luxury boutiques, felt like a different world from the one Eloise inhabited. He had seen glimpses of that world during his brief encounter with her, but now he felt an overwhelming desire to dive deeper. Arthur parked his car in front of a small cafe in a less affluent part of town. He stepped inside, the bell above the door chiming softly. The air was thick with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and baked goods, but instead of comfort, it only reminded him of the disparity that lay just beyond the cafe's walls. He approached the counter, where a young barista greeted him with a warm smile. "Good morning, sir. What can I get for you?" she asked cheerfully. Just a coffee, please," Arthur replied absent-mindedly, his mind racing. As he waited, he looked around the cafe, observing the patrons. There was a group of mothers sitting at a table, their laughter filling the air, but beneath it, Arthur could sense their struggles. A woman cradled her baby while another dug through her purse, searching for change. He felt a pang of guilt. These women were like Eloise, fighting battles he had never had to face. With his coffee in hand, Arthur took a seat at a small table in the corner, hoping to gather his thoughts. He pulled out his phone, scrolling through his contacts, searching for someone who could help him find Eloise. As he did, he noticed a small flyer taped to the wall beside him. It read, "Community support for mothers in need. Help us help others." His heart raced as he absorbed the information. The flyer provided an address and a contact number. He quickly jotted it down, his resolve strengthening. He would not rest until he found Eloise and made amends. He finished his coffee, paid, and left the cafe, determination fueling his steps. The sun hung high in the sky as he navigated the city streets, his thoughts swirling with questions. What would he say to Eloise when he found her? How could he possibly explain the turmoil within him? He arrived at the address listed on the flyer, a modest building that contrasted sharply with his opulent lifestyle. The sign above the door read, "Hope Haven," and the sounds of laughter and conversation spilled out into the street. As he stepped inside, Arthur was greeted by a warm, inviting atmosphere. The walls were adorned with colorful artwork created by children, and the air buzzed with energy. He approached the reception desk, where a friendly woman was busy organizing paperwork. "Hello. "How can I help you today?" she asked, looking up with a bright smile. "Hi, my name is Arthur Prescott," he introduced himself, trying to sound casual. "I'm looking for someone named Eloise. I believe she might be here." The receptionist's smile faltered slightly, her expression turning serious. "Eloise?" "Yes, she's been coming here regularly." "Is everything okay?" Arthur hesitated, feeling the weight of his intentions. I just want to talk to her. I need to understand." "Sure, let me check if she's available," the receptionist replied, then walked away to the back of the office. Arthur felt the tension in his chest tighten as he waited, his fingers tapping nervously on the desk. Moments later, the receptionist returned, her expression softening. "Eloise is in the back with a group of women. I can take you to her," she offered. "Thank you," Arthur replied, his heart pounding as he followed her through the bustling center. The walls were alive with conversation, laughter, and the occasional cries of children. He felt out of place, but an undeniable sense of purpose propelled him forward. They reached a small room where several women were sitting in a circle, sharing stories and experiences. Eloise sat among them, her hair pulled back, her demeanor calm yet vibrant as she spoke. Arthur felt a wave of emotion wash over him at the sight of her. She looked strong, resilient, and at ease. The receptionist knocked gently on the doorframe, drawing Eloise's attention. "Excuse me, Eloise. You have a visitor." Eloise turned to see Arthur standing there, a mixture of surprise and caution crossing her features. "Arthur," she said slowly, her voice tinged with disbelief. "What are you doing here?" "I came to find you," he said, stepping into the room, every eye now fixed on him. "I need to talk to you." Eloise exchanged glances with the other women before gesturing for him to sit. "All right," she said, her tone cautious yet inviting. "What do you want to talk about?" Arthur took a deep breath, the weight of his privilege pressing down on him. "I'm sorry. I didn't understand before. I thought I could help you by offering a place to stay, but I realize now that I was just scratching the surface of something much deeper." Eloise studied him, her expression unreadable. "You had no way of knowing, Arthur. Most people don't. But I want to know," he insisted, leaning forward. "I want to understand what you and so many others are going through. I want to help in a way that makes a real difference." A moment of silence lingered in the room before Eloise spoke again. "It's not just about money or food. It's about connection, support, and understanding. It's about the community we build and the love we share." Arthur nodded, absorbing her words. "I've been living in a bubble, and I didn't even realize it. I want to change that. I want to help create opportunities for women like you, mothers who are struggling." Eloise's eyes softened, a flicker of hope igniting within them. "You're serious about this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Absolutely," Arthur replied, his conviction unwavering. "Whatever it takes. I want to partner with you to create programs that provide support, jobs, and housing for those in need. I want to turn this into a movement." The other women in the room exchanged glances, their expressions a mix of skepticism and curiosity. Eloise regarded Arthur thoughtfully. "It won't be easy. There will be challenges, and you'll need to be ready to face them head-on." "I'm ready," Arthur said firmly. "I want to do this right." Eloise smiled, her warmth breaking through the uncertainty that had initially clouded their meeting. "All right then. Let's start by sharing our stories. You'll see what we face every day, and together, we can figure out how to make a real impact." As the group began to share their experiences, Arthur listened intently, each story pulling at his heartstrings. He realized that this was just the beginning of a long journey, a journey that would reshape him, teaching him the true meaning of compassion, empathy, and community. Arthur Prescott had always prided himself on his ability to compartmentalize his life. The high-stakes world of business was a realm where emotions were often seen as a weakness, a liability. Yet, as he wandered through the impoverished neighborhoods of Los Angeles, a strange sensation washed over him. The streets were alive with a cacophony of sounds, the distant honking of cars, the laughter of children playing, the muffled conversations of adults who seemed to carry the weight of the world on their shoulders. Arthur felt as if he were stepping into a different universe, one that had been hidden from his view for far too long. He walked down a narrow street lined with crumbling buildings and faded graffiti. The sun was setting, casting an orange glow over everything and illuminating the grit and despair that had been painted over for so long. As he paused to catch his breath, he noticed a small group of women gathered on the steps of a dilapidated building. They were engaged in a conversation that was both animated and somber, their faces etched with lines of worry and resilience. "Excuse me." Arthur approached them, his voice hesitant but firm. "I'm looking for someone. I think she might have been here recently." The women turned to look at him, their expressions ranging from curiosity to suspicion. One of them, a woman with bright blue eyes and tangled hair pulled into a messy bun, stepped forward. "Who are you looking for?" she asked, her tone laced with caution. "Her name is Eloise. She was here with her daughter, Sophia. I think she might have been staying with you." The blue-eyed woman exchanged glances with her companions. "Eloise? Yeah, I remember her. She was here a couple of days ago. But she left. Do you know where she went?" Arthur pressed, his heart racing. "I don't know," the woman replied, shaking her head. "But she was worried about finding a place to stay. Said something about an emergency shelter. Maybe you should check there." "Thank you," Arthur replied, feeling a mix of relief and urgency. He turned to leave, but the woman called after him. "Wait, you don't look like you belong here. What's a rich guy like you doing in a place like this?" Arthur hesitated, unsure of how to respond. The truth felt too convoluted to explain. I'm trying to help," he finally said, his voice steady. "I want to make a difference." The woman studied him for a moment, her expression softening slightly. "Good luck with that. These streets can chew you up and spit you out if you're not careful." As he made his way to the emergency shelter, Arthur couldn't shake the feeling that he was stepping into uncharted territory. The flashes of his comfortable life felt distant now, like a movie he had once watched but had never truly lived. The shelter was located in a repurposed church, its facade worn but dignified. Arthur took a deep breath before pushing open the heavy wooden doors. Inside, the atmosphere was warm but chaotic. The sound of children playing mingled with the murmurs of women discussing their struggles and hopes. Arthur's presence drew curious glances, but he pressed on, determined to find Eloise. He approached the front desk, where a tired-looking woman was sorting through paperwork. "Excuse me," Arthur said, his voice raised slightly to be heard over the noise. "I'm looking for a woman named Eloise. She was here with her daughter." The woman at the desk looked up, her brow furrowing in concentration. "Eloise? Yes, she was here, but she left just this morning. I think she mentioned something about going to a community center nearby to see if they could help her with job placement." Arthur felt a rush of frustration but quickly pushed it aside. "Do you know which community center?" "Just a few blocks from here. You can't miss it. It's the one with the mural on the side." "Thank you," he replied, already turning to leave. As he stepped back out onto the street, the fading daylight wrapped around him like a cloak, fueling his determination. The community center was bustling with activity. As Arthur entered, he was met with the sounds of laughter, conversations, and the clattering of chairs. Colorful artwork adorned the walls, each piece telling a story of struggle and perseverance. He approached a group of women sitting at a table, their faces illuminated with expressions of hope. "Excuse me," Arthur said, his voice cutting through the background noise. "I'm looking for Eloise. She was here earlier today." A woman with curly hair and a warm smile looked up from her conversation. "Eloise? She was just here. I think she went to the back to talk to someone about job opportunities." "Thank you," Arthur replied, relief flooding through him as he made his way toward the back of the center. As he entered the back room, he found Eloise sitting at a table with a counselor, her face animated as she discussed her options. Arthur's heart raced at the sight of her. He took a moment to gather himself before clearing his throat. "Eloise," he called out, and her head snapped up, surprise flooding her features. "Arthur," she exclaimed, standing up abruptly, her chair scraping across the floor. "What are you doing here?" "I've been looking for you," he admitted, stepping closer. "I was worried. I didn't know if you were okay." Eloise's expression softened, but a flicker of hesitation crossed her face. "I'm fine. Just trying to find a way to get back on my feet." "I want to help," Arthur said earnestly. "I know I can't change everything, but I want to do something meaningful. You mentioned a project to help mothers like you. Let's make it happen. Eloise studied him for a moment, her brow furrowed in thought. You don't understand what it's like here, Arthur. It's not just about money. It's about trust. It's about community. I understand more than you think, he insisted, his voice firm. I've seen the struggles, and I know I can use my resources to create something that can change lives. But I need your help to understand what's truly needed. After a moment of silence, Eloise nodded slowly, her defenses lowering. All right, if you're serious about this, we can start by talking to the women here. They need more than just handouts. They need a support system. Arthur felt a rush of excitement mixed with trepidation. Then let's start today. Let's listen to their stories, understand their needs, and build something that lasts. Eloise smiled, a mixture of disbelief and hope flickering in her eyes. You really mean it? I do, he affirmed, feeling a sense of purpose growing within him. As they walked back into the main area, Arthur felt a shift in the air. This was not just a meeting of two worlds. It was the beginning of a collaboration that could bridge the gap between affluence and adversity. He could see the potential in the women's eyes, the yearning for change, and he knew that together, they could forge a new path. Let's gather everyone, Eloise said, her voice steady. If we're going to do this, we need to make sure everyone is on board. Arthur nodded, excitement bubbling within him. As they began to speak to the women, he realized that this was not just about giving. It was about listening, valuing their experiences, and creating a true partnership. In that moment, he understood that the wealth he had always chased paled in comparison to the richness of the connections they were about to forge. Arthur Prescott stood at the entrance of the shelter, his heart racing with a mix of anticipation and trepidation. The stark contrast of his opulent life against the backdrop of the shelter's simple, worn exterior weighed heavily on him. He had spent days searching for Eloise and Sophia, driven by an inexplicable longing that had taken root in him since their brief encounter. He had been drawn into a world he had never truly known, one filled with struggle, resilience, and profound human connection. Taking a deep breath, he pushed open the creaky door and stepped inside. The warmth of the space enveloped him, but it was also tinged with the scent of despair and hope intertwined. Rows of cots lined the walls, and the soft murmur of voices filled the air, punctuated by the laughter of children playing in a corner. Arthur's gaze swept across the room, searching for the familiar figure of Eloise. Can I help you? A woman approached him, her expression a mixture of curiosity and concern. She wore a simple, faded sweater and had kind eyes that seemed to see through the layers of his designer suit to the man underneath. I'm looking for Eloise, he replied, his voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside him. Eloise and her daughter, Sophia. The woman's face softened. You must be Arthur. I've heard about you. Eloise is helping out in the back with some of the other mothers. Follow me. Arthur nodded, following the woman as she led him through the shelter. They passed a small kitchen where volunteers were preparing meals, and he caught sight of the children, their laughter a bright note in the otherwise somber atmosphere. Each step he took felt heavier with the weight of the moment, but he was resolute. As they reached the back room, the woman gestured for him to enter. She's in there. Just be gentle with her, okay? It's been a tough time for her. He nodded again, steeling himself before pushing the door open. The room was filled with a group of women, each engaged in various activities. Some were sewing, others were counseling, and a few were simply talking. And there, in the middle of it all, was Eloise. She was sitting on the floor, surrounded by fabric scraps, her hair pulled back in a messy bun, a look of concentration on her face. At the sound of the door creaking, she looked up, her eyes widening in surprise. Arthur, she stood up slowly, brushing her hands on her jeans, as if to rid herself of the remnants of her work. What are you doing here? I've been looking for you, he said, stepping further into the room. He hesitated, suddenly feeling the weight of his privilege in a space filled with struggle. I wanted to see how you and Sophia are doing. Eloise's expression shifted, a mixture of surprise and caution. We're managing, she replied, her voice steady but guarded. What about you? I didn't expect to see you again. I realize now how much I don't understand, he admitted, his voice low. After you left, I couldn't stop thinking about what you said, the part about true wealth. I want to help. A flicker of hope crossed Eloise's face, but she quickly masked it with skepticism. Help? How? You're a millionaire, Arthur. You live in a mansion. What do you know about this life? I may have money, but that doesn't mean I understand the struggles you face, he replied earnestly. I want to do more than just throw money at the problem. I want to make a real difference. Eloise studied him, her brow furrowed as she considered his words. It's not just about money. It's about understanding, about connection. Can you really do that? Arthur nodded, his determination unwavering. I want to create something, maybe a program to help women like you find stable housing and jobs. I want to work alongside you, to learn from you. The room fell silent as the other women turned their attention to the unfolding conversation. Eloise looked around, gauging their reactions before turning back to Arthur. You'd really want to do that? With us? Absolutely, he affirmed. I've seen the struggles firsthand, and I can't turn my back on it. I was blind before, but now I see. I want this to be a partnership. Eloise's expression softened, a flicker of hope igniting in her eyes. If you're serious about this, it could really help. But it's not going to be easy, Arthur. We're talking about systemic issues, not just quick fixes. I'm ready for that, he replied, his voice steady. I've spent so long chasing success defined by money. Now, I want to redefine it through helping others. Eloise took a deep breath, her mind racing with possibilities. Okay, then let's start with a plan. We can gather some of the other women here, talk about what we need and how to make it work. Arthur felt a surge of excitement at her response. Yes, I can bring resources, and we can brainstorm ideas together. I want to know what you need most. As they began to discuss logistics, the other women gradually joined in, sharing their thoughts and ideas. Arthur listened intently, absorbing every word, every story. The room buzzed with energy and purpose, and he felt himself becoming a part of something far greater than himself. Arthur, one woman said, her voice bold and unwavering. We need more than just jobs. We need support for our children, access to education, childcare. It's an uphill battle. I can help with that, he promised. I'll reach out to local businesses, find mentors who can provide job training, and even connect with schools to create after-school programs. We'll tackle this together. Eloise watched as Arthur's passion ignited the room, her heart swelling with a mixture of hope and skepticism. Could this man, who had lived a life so different from hers, really be the catalyst for change? As they continued to plan, the sun began to set outside, casting a warm glow through the shelter's windows. Arthur felt a sense of purpose he had never experienced before. Each idea shared, each story told, pulled him deeper into a world that was both challenging and beautiful in its resilience. When they finally wrapped up their meeting, Eloise turned to Arthur, her expression earnest. Thank you for being here, for listening. This means more than you know. Arthur smiled, the warmth of her gratitude washing over him. No, thank you for showing me what truly matters. I'm excited about what we can do together. As he left the shelter that evening, Arthur felt a renewed sense of hope. He had found a purpose that transcended wealth, one rooted in compassion and connection. The journey ahead would be challenging, but he was ready to embrace it, side by side with Eloise and the incredible women he had just met. The true wealth he sought was unfolding before him, and he knew that together, they could change lives, not just their own, but countless others. Arthur Prescott stood outside the entrance of the shelter, his heart racing. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows that danced on the pavement. He had spent days searching for Eloise and her daughter, Sophia, driven by a growing sense of urgency and purpose that had replaced the apathy he once felt towards life's injustices. The sight of the shelter, a modest building with peeling paint and a flickering neon sign, was a stark contrast to his opulent mansion, yet it felt like a sacred place. Taking a deep breath, he pushed the heavy door open, and the faint sound of children's laughter mixed with the soft whispers of women filled the air. Inside, the atmosphere was warm and inviting. A group of women gathered around a table, preparing a meal, while others tended to their children. Arthur's eyes scanned the room, searching for the familiar face of Eloise. "Can I help you, sir?" A gentle voice interrupted his thoughts. He turned to see a woman in her 30s, her hair tied back in a bun, wearing a simple but clean dress. She looked at him with a mix of curiosity and concern. "I'm looking for Eloise," Arthur replied, his voice steadier than he felt. "I met her a few days ago, and I need to speak with her." The woman's expression softened. "You must be Arthur. I'm Lily, one of the coordinators here. Eloise talked about you. She's in the back, helping organize our donations." Arthur felt a rush of relief mixed with apprehension. "Thank you, Lily." He followed her through a narrow corridor, the walls adorned with drawings and messages of hope created by the children who frequented the shelter. As they approached a small room, Arthur caught a glimpse of Eloise, her hair slightly disheveled, but her spirit unmistakably radiant. She was seated on the floor, sorting through clothing donations with a few other women. The moment she looked up and met his gaze, time seemed to stand still. "Eloise," he breathed, stepping into the room. "Arthur," she responded, her voice a mixture of surprise and caution. She stood up, brushing off her jeans. "What are you doing here?" "I had to find you," he said, his heart pounding in his chest. "I've been searching everywhere. Your note, it changed everything for me." Eloise's brow furrowed as she studied him, the warmth in her eyes replaced by wariness. "You shouldn't have come here. This place isn't for people like you." "People like me?" Arthur echoed, feeling a sting at her words. "I'm not here to judge or to help out of guilt. I want to understand. I want to help." "Help?" Eloise crossed her arms, her expression skeptical. "You think throwing money at problems is the solution? Because that's not how it works. You can't just swoop in and save us." "I know that now," Arthur admitted, his voice low. "I thought that money could fix everything, but I was wrong. I've seen too much, too many people suffering. I want to do more than just write a check." "Then what do you want?" she asked, her tone softening slightly. "What do you really want?" "I want to work with you," he said earnestly. "I want to create something meaningful, something that can truly make a difference for women like you, for mothers who are struggling. I want to help them find homes, jobs, a better life." Eloise regarded him for a long moment, weighing his words. "You don't know what you're asking for, Arthur. This isn't just a project, it's a commitment. It'll take more than just your resources. You'll need to understand the struggles, the fears, the real lives behind the statistics." "I'm willing to learn," he insisted, his determination shining through. "I've been living in a bubble for too long. I want to break out of it. I want to be part of something real." Eloise sighed, her shoulders slumping slightly. "It won't be easy. You'll face challenges that you've never experienced before. Are you sure you're ready for that?" "I've never been more certain in my life," Arthur replied, his voice steady. She looked into his eyes, searching for any hint of insincerity, but all she found was a depth of feeling that surprised her. "All right," she finally said, her voice a whisper. "If you're serious about this, then we have to start somewhere. We need funds, but more importantly, we need compassion and understanding. Can you give us that?" "Yes," he affirmed, a sense of hope filling the space between them. "I can do that. I want to be here, to listen, to learn." "Then let's get to work," Eloise said with a small, tentative smile. "We need to figure out a plan. There are so many mothers out there who need help, and we can't do it alone." As they began to discuss their ideas, Arthur felt a shift within himself. The world he once knew, filled with luxury and solitude, began to fade into the background. In its place, a new reality emerged, a world bursting with potential, fueled by empathy and collaboration. "Do you have any specific ideas?" he asked, leaning forward, eager to engage. "There are a few resources I've thought about," Eloise replied, her enthusiasm growing. "We could start with workshops, helping women build their resumes, practice interviews, and find job opportunities. But we also need a safe space for the children while their mothers are working or attending classes." "That's brilliant," Arthur said, nodding vigorously. "I can reach out to some local businesses for sponsorships. They might be willing to provide resources or even mentorship programs." Eloise smiled, encouraged by his enthusiasm. "And we need to create a community, a support system where these women can share their experiences and help each other." "Absolutely. We could set up regular meetings, maybe even a newsletter to keep everyone informed and connected," Arthur suggested, his mind racing with possibilities. Let's not forget about housing, Eloise added, her tone turning serious again. We need to address the most pressing issue first, getting these mothers and their kids into safe homes. Arthur swallowed hard, the weight of her words sinking in. I'll do whatever it takes, he vowed. I can leverage my connections to find available housing and funding. We won't just be helping them, we'll be giving them a chance to rebuild their lives. As they continued to brainstorm, the atmosphere in the room shifted from one of uncertainty to one of hope and determination. Arthur felt a sense of purpose he had never experienced before, and for the first time, he felt truly alive. Thank you for believing in me, Eloise, he said, sincerity etched across his face. I promise I won't let you down. Just remember, she cautioned, this is a journey, not a sprint. We'll face setbacks, and our plans may change. But as long as we stay committed and keep our hearts open, we can make a difference. Arthur nodded, absorbing her words. He could feel the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders, but it was a burden he was ready to bear. Together, they would embark on a journey that would not only change the lives of many, but would also redefine what it meant for him to be truly rich. Arthur Prescott stood at the entrance of the shelter, his heart pounding in his chest. The air was thick with the scent of cleaning products and the faint aroma of something simmering in the kitchen. He had spent the last few days tracking Eloise, but the thought of finally confronting her filled him with a mixture of excitement and dread. He had thought about her every waking moment, replaying their last encounter in his mind, the way her eyes had shimmered with both pain and resilience. As he stepped inside, the noise of children playing and women chatting enveloped him. The bright colors of the walls contrasted sharply with the harsh reality outside, creating a sanctuary amidst the chaos of life. Arthur's gaze scanned the room, searching for Eloise. It was then that he saw her, bent over a table, surrounded by a few women, her hands deftly folding clothes. She wore a simple blue dress that seemed to highlight her strength rather than her circumstances. Eloise, Arthur called out, his voice a mixture of urgency and hope. Startled, Eloise looked up, her expression shifting from surprise to cautious recognition. Arthur, she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. She straightened, her hands still clutching a piece of fabric as if it were a lifeline. He stepped closer, the distance between them both a chasm and a bridge. I've been looking for you, he said, trying to keep his tone even. I didn't know where to find you. Eloise's eyes narrowed slightly, a flicker of vulnerability crossing her face. Why, Arthur? Why did you come here? I needed to understand, he confessed, glancing at the women around them. What you said in your note about true wealth, it made me think. I've never really considered what it means to help others. I was so caught up in my own life, my own success. Eloise regarded him carefully, her expression a mix of skepticism and curiosity. You think you can just walk in here and say that? You think it's that easy? Arthur felt a knot tighten in his stomach. No, I don't think it's easy. I realize now that I've lived in a bubble, isolated from the realities so many people face. I want to help. I want to do something meaningful. She folded her arms, her brow furrowing. And what does that look like to you, Arthur? You throw money at problems, but that doesn't solve anything. You can't just fix things with a check. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her words. I understand that now. I don't want to just throw money at it. I want to be involved, to create real change. I want to work with you, if you'll let me. Eloise's gaze softened slightly as she studied him, searching for sincerity. Why me? Why not just write a check to some charity and call it a day? Because, he said, his voice steady, I've seen what you're doing here. You're making a difference. And I want to be part of that. I want to help mothers like you, women who are fighting for their children and their futures. The room had quieted as the other women turned their attention to the exchange. Eloise, still wary, took a step back, creating some distance between them. You don't understand the struggle, Arthur. You live in a mansion while we're fighting for every meal. You think that because you have money, you can swoop in and save us. I don't want to save anyone, he replied, his voice firm yet gentle. I want to empower. I want to listen. I want to learn from you. Please, let me show you that I'm serious about this. A tense silence hung in the air as Eloise considered his words. Finally, she sighed, the fight in her eyes dimming. Okay, let's say I believe you. What do you propose we do? Arthur felt a spark of hope igniting within him. Let's start by creating a program that provides job training and housing assistance for mothers in need. We can offer workshops, mentorship, anything that can help them build a better life for themselves and their children. Eloise raised an eyebrow, intrigued but cautious. And how do you plan to fund this? You can't just will it into existence. I have resources, he acknowledged, but I also want to involve the community. We can host fundraisers, reach out to local businesses for support. But more importantly, we can create a network where women can share their experiences and uplift each other. As he spoke, Arthur could see Eloise's defenses starting to lower, a flicker of hope igniting in her eyes. You really think we can do that? I believe we can, he replied, his voice filled with conviction. I've learned so much from you already. You have the strength and the knowledge to lead this. I can help with the logistics and resources, but you're the heart of this initiative. Her expression softened, and for a moment, the weight of their circumstances seemed to lift. If we do this, it has to be real. No empty promises. We have to make a difference. Absolutely, he agreed, his eyes locked on hers. I won't let you down. Eloise nodded slowly, a tentative smile beginning to form on her lips. All right then, let's see what we can create together. As they began to brainstorm ideas for their project, the atmosphere in the shelter shifted. Other women who had been watching the exchange started to gather around, drawn by the energy of the conversation. With each idea shared, Arthur felt a sense of purpose solidifying within him. No longer was he just a wealthy businessman. He was now part of a movement, a mission that transcended material success. Can we hold workshops here? He asked Eloise, excitement bubbling in his voice. There's so much potential in this space. Definitely, she responded, her enthusiasm growing. We can turn this into a hub for learning and support. We can invite guest speakers, provide resources, and create a community of empowerment. Arthur nodded vigorously, the vision coming to life in his mind. And we can develop a mentorship program where successful women from the community can guide those who are just starting out. Eloise smiled, her skepticism giving way to hope. Yes, that could make such a difference. It's about building connections, showing these women that they're not alone. As they continued to brainstorm, the other women began to chime in, sharing their experiences and ideas. Arthur felt a warmth spreading through him as he listened to their stories, their dreams, and their struggles. Each voice added another layer to the mission they were creating together. Arthur, one woman exclaimed, her eyes bright with inspiration. What if we partner with local businesses to provide job training? They could offer internships, and we could help with resume writing and interview skills. I love that idea, Arthur replied, feeling the energy of the room surge. We can create a comprehensive program that not only addresses immediate needs, but also builds long-term success. As the brainstorming session continued, Arthur realized that they were not just creating a project, they were building a community, a network of support, compassion, and empowerment. And in that moment, surrounded by these incredible women, he understood the true meaning of wealth. It wasn't about the numbers in his bank account, but the connections he forged and the lives he could touch. As he and Eloise exchanged ideas, their partnership began to take shape, fueled by a shared vision and a commitment to making a difference. Arthur felt a sense of fulfillment he had never experienced before, knowing that he was finally on the right path, one that led to genuine change and a brighter future for those who needed it most. Arthur Prescott stood at the entrance of the shelter, his heart pounding in his chest. The world outside was a stark contrast to the warmth and safety of his mansion. Here, the air was thick with stories of struggle and resilience, and he felt like an intruder stepping into a realm he had only glimpsed through the windows of his luxury car. As he walked inside, the dimly lit room buzzed with the quiet hum of conversations. Women sat in small groups, their faces etched with worry but also with determination. Arthur's gaze landed on Eloise, who was sitting cross-legged on a worn-out mat, surrounded by a few mothers and their children. The sight struck him like a lightning bolt. This was where she belonged, and he had nearly lost her. Eloise, he called out, his voice barely above a whisper. She looked up, her eyes widening in surprise, and for a moment, Time stood still. "Arthur," she replied, her voice a mix of disbelief and caution. "What are you doing here?" He stepped closer, the distance between them feeling both daunting and electric. "I've been looking for you. I was worried. I didn't know if you were safe." Eloise studied him for a moment, her expression unreadable. "You shouldn't have come here," she said softly, glancing at the other women who were now watching them with curiosity. "This place, it's not for people like you." "People like me?" Arthur echoed, a hint of indignation creeping into his tone. "What do you mean?" Eloise sighed, running a hand through her hair. "You're a millionaire, Arthur. You live in a world where problems can be solved with money. Here, we're fighting for survival. It's different." Arthur shook his head, frustration bubbling to the surface. "I know that. But I've seen things out there, things that have changed me. I want to help. I want to do something meaningful." Eloise's eyes softened, and she gestured for him to sit beside her. "You're in a good place to start," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But it's not just about money or resources. It's about understanding. It's about listening." "Then teach me," he said, the sincerity in his voice cutting through the heaviness of the moment. "I want to understand. I want to do more than just write a check." Eloise looked around at the other women, who were now engaged in their own conversations, some laughing, others sharing stories of heartache. "Okay," she said slowly, "but it won't be easy. It will take time, and you'll need to be patient." "I can be patient," Arthur replied, his determination shining through. "I'm ready to learn." The two of them spent the next few hours together, Eloise introducing Arthur to the women in the shelter. He listened intently as they shared their stories, tales of loss, resilience, and hope. One woman, Maria, spoke of how she had fled an abusive relationship, clutching her 2 children tightly as she escaped. Another, Jamila, described how she had lost her job during the pandemic and was struggling to make ends meet. "Do you really think you can help us?" Maria asked Arthur, her voice laced with skepticism. "People like you come and go. They promise the world but never stick around when times get tough." Arthur met her gaze, his heart heavy with the weight of her words. "I know I'm a stranger here, but I want to be different. I want to be here for as long as it takes," he replied earnestly. "I want to help create opportunities, not just handouts." Eloise nodded, sensing the sincerity in his voice. "It's not just about creating opportunities, Arthur. It's about building trust. These women have been let down before. They need to feel safe." Arthur took a deep breath, the reality of the situation settling over him like a heavy blanket. "What if we organized workshops? Help them with skills, resume writing, interview techniques," he suggested. "I could even fund childcare services so they can focus." Eloise's eyes sparkled with a hint of hope. "That's a start. But remember, it's not just about the skills. They need support, encouragement, a community that believes in them." "I can help build that community," Arthur insisted. "I've got connections in the business world. We can bring in mentors, provide resources. We can make this place a beacon of hope." The conversation continued late into the evening, the atmosphere shifting from skepticism to a budding sense of possibility. As each woman shared her story, Arthur felt his resolve strengthen. He was no longer just a wealthy businessman. He was becoming a part of something larger than himself. "Thank you for listening," Jamila said, her voice trembling slightly. "It means more than you know." Arthur nodded, feeling a lump form in his throat. "No, thank you for sharing. It's an honor to hear your stories." As the night wore on, Eloise and Arthur found themselves sitting together once more, the weight of the day settling between them. "I can't believe how much I've learned today," Arthur admitted, his voice low. "I used to think I had all the answers, but now I see how little I really knew." Eloise smiled softly, her expression a mixture of pride and understanding. "It takes courage to admit that, Arthur. Most people hide behind their wealth and power, refusing to see the struggles of others." "I want to be different," he said, determination etched on his face. "I want to be part of the solution." Eloise placed a hand on his arm, her touch grounding him. "You already are. But remember, this is just the beginning. You'll face challenges, setbacks. Some people won't believe in you. You'll need to stay committed, no matter what." "I will," he promised, leaning closer. "I'm in this for the long haul." As they sat together in the shelter, surrounded by the stories and struggles of those seeking a better life, Arthur felt a transformation within himself. The coldness that had once defined his existence was melting away, replaced by a warmth that blossomed at the thought of making a difference. The world outside seemed far away, and for the first time, he felt truly connected to something meaningful. "Let's do this together," he said, his voice filled with conviction. "I want to help create a future where mothers like you don't have to struggle alone." Eloise nodded, her eyes shining with gratitude. "Together, we can make a change. It won't be easy, but it will be worth it." As the two of them began to sketch out plans for the future, Arthur felt a renewed sense of purpose. The journey ahead would be difficult, but for the first time in years, he was ready to embrace the challenges that lay ahead. The walls he had built around himself were crumbling, and he was stepping into a new reality, one where compassion and connection reigned supreme. Arthur Prescott stood in front of the modest shelter, its worn wooden sign swaying slightly in the breeze. The air was thick with the scent of sweat and hope, two things that seemed to coexist in this space. He had spent the last few days scouring the streets of Los Angeles, fueled by a sense of urgency that he had never felt before. The note Eloise had left him burned in his pocket, a constant reminder of what he was searching for, the connection that transcended wealth and privilege. Pushing the door open, Arthur was greeted by the soft murmur of voices and the gentle sound of children laughing. It was a stark contrast to the silence of his empty mansion, where the walls echoed with the memories of a lonely existence. He stepped inside, and his eyes adjusted to the dim light. Rows of cots lined the room, and the walls were adorned with colorful drawings done by the children who had found refuge here. "Can I help you?" a woman asked, her voice firm yet warm. She was in her late 30s, with tired eyes that told stories of their own. "I'm looking for someone," Arthur replied, his voice catching momentarily in his throat. "Eloise." "Eloise and her daughter, Sophia." The woman's expression softened. "You're looking for Eloise? She's been a beacon of hope for many of us here. Follow me. I believe she's in the back." As they walked deeper into the shelter, Arthur felt an odd mix of anxiety and anticipation. Would Eloise be angry? Would she even want to see him after everything that had happened? The woman led him to a small room filled with crafts and supplies. There, amidst a group of women, sat Eloise. She was painting a bright mural on the wall, her hands deftly guiding the brush as she mixed colors. "Eloise," Arthur called out, unable to restrain himself. She turned, her face lighting up with surprise. "Arthur." She set the brush down and walked toward him, her eyes searching his face for answers. "What are you doing here?" "I had to find you," he said, his heart racing. "I read your note, and it made me realize how selfish I had been. I want to help. I want to do something meaningful." Eloise's brow furrowed, a mix of skepticism and hope flickering in her gaze. "You want to help? You, Arthur Prescott? You're a millionaire. What do you know about what we go through?" "I know more than I ever wanted to," Arthur replied, his voice steady. "I thought money could solve everything, but it can't. Not anymore. I've seen the pain, the struggle, and I want to make a change." Eloise studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Finally, she sighed and gestured for him to sit at a nearby table. "All right, let's talk. But if we're going to do this, I need you to be honest. About everything." Arthur nodded, feeling the weight of her words. "I promise. I'll be honest." As they sat across from each other, Eloise began to speak. "You know, it's not just about providing shelter or food. It's about dignity. It's about giving these women a chance to rebuild their lives. Many of us have lost everything through no fault of our own. We need support, not just charity." "I understand that now," Arthur admitted, his voice low. "I've realized that my wealth doesn't mean much if I'm not using it to lift others up. I want to create a program that empowers women like you. Jobs, training, a safe space for them to thrive." Eloise leaned back, her eyes narrowing thoughtfully. "And you think you can just throw money at it and fix everything? It's not that simple. We need community. We need trust." "I know it's not simple," he replied urgently, "but I'm willing to learn. I want to partner with you, to listen to your ideas. You know what these women need better than I ever could." Eloise's gaze softened, and she leaned forward. "All right, let's say I believe you. What do you have in mind?" Arthur felt a surge of hope. "First, we can start with a few workshops, job training, financial literacy, and even mental health support. We can bring in professionals who care, who understand the challenges these women face. Then, we can work on building connections with local businesses that can provide jobs." Eloise nodded slowly, her mind racing with possibilities. That could work. But it's important that the women feel like they're part of this process. They need to feel ownership over their futures. Absolutely, Arthur agreed. "You're right. We can involve them in planning and decision-making. I want them to have a voice." Just then, a small girl with curly hair and bright eyes approached them. "Mommy, can we paint after this?" she asked, looking up at Eloise. "Of course, sweetheart," Eloise replied, her voice softening. She turned to Arthur with a tender smile. "This is Sophia." Arthur felt a pang of emotion as he looked at the little girl. "She's beautiful," he said. "You're doing such a wonderful job, Eloise." Eloise's smile faded slightly as she glanced at her daughter. "I'm trying my best. But it's hard, you know? I want to give her a better life, a life without fear." "I can help with that," Arthur murmured, his conviction growing stronger. "Let's work together to create a safe environment for not just Sophia, but for all the children here. They deserve a fighting chance." Eloise studied him, her expression a mix of hope and uncertainty. "If we do this, we have to go all in. No half measures. It needs to be sustainable." "I'm in," he said, his voice firm. "No more shortcuts. Let's make a real impact." As they continued to discuss their plans, the initial tension between them began to dissolve. Eloise felt a flicker of hope igniting within her, and Arthur realized that he was finally on a path that felt right. It was as if the universe had conspired to bring them together for a purpose greater than themselves. After hours of brainstorming, they decided to host an open meeting the following week to gather input from the women at the shelter. Arthur felt exhilarated. He was no longer just a wealthy businessman. He was becoming part of a community, a movement dedicated to change. As they stood to leave, Eloise clasped Arthur's hand firmly, her eyes bright with determination. "Thank you for believing in us, Arthur. But remember, this is just the beginning." Arthur nodded, feeling the weight of her words. "I promise I won't let you down." And with that, they stepped out of the shelter, each carrying a newfound sense of purpose, ready to face the challenges ahead. The sun was setting over Los Angeles, casting a warm glow over the city, a city filled with possibilities, hope, and the promise of change. The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting a warm golden hue over the city of Los Angeles. Arthur Prescott stood outside the entrance of the shelter, the faint scent of fresh bread wafting through the air, mingling with the more sobering realities of the place. He had spent days searching for Eloise, and now that he was finally here, a whirlwind of emotions swept over him. Anticipation, fear, and a flicker of hope. "Are you certain this is the right place?" Arthur asked himself, glancing around. The shelter was a far cry from the polished marble floors of his mansion. It had a worn exterior, but the lively chatter of children and the warmth radiating from within suggested that this was a haven for many. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for the encounter that lay ahead. As he walked through the entrance, the atmosphere shifted. The walls were adorned with colorful artwork created by the children who frequented the shelter, and the sound of laughter and conversation filled the air. It felt alive, vibrant, a stark contrast to the loneliness he had experienced in his luxurious isolation. "Can I help you?" A kind voice interrupted his thoughts. A middle-aged woman with kind eyes approached him. She wore a simple apron over a faded shirt, and her hands were dusted with flour. "I'm looking for Eloise," Arthur replied, his voice steady but laced with urgency. "She was here a few days ago." The woman's expression softened. "Eloise?" "Yes, she's here. She's been a tremendous help to us." She gestured toward the back of the room. "You'll find her in the community room. Just follow the sounds of laughter." Arthur thanked her and made his way toward the back, where he heard the unmistakable sound of children playing. As he entered the room, his heart raced. There, surrounded by a group of children, was Eloise. She was kneeling on the floor, her hair slightly disheveled, but her face illuminated with joy. She was teaching them how to make paper flowers, her gentle voice encouraging and filled with laughter. "Look, like this," she exclaimed, showing a young girl how to fold the paper just right. The children giggled, their faces glowing with delight. It was a scene that filled Arthur with a bittersweet ache. He had never seen Eloise like this, alive, engaged, and in her element. Eloise turned her head slightly, sensing someone's gaze upon her. When her eyes met Arthur's, the world around them seemed to freeze. The laughter faded into the background, and for a moment, it was just the two of them in the room. "Arthur," she breathed, standing up slowly. The children, sensing the shift in the atmosphere, began to quiet down, looking between the two adults. "Eloise," he replied, his voice softer than he intended. The warmth he had felt in her presence before surged back, intertwining with a sense of purpose. "I've been looking for you. What are you doing here?" Eloise asked, her brow furrowing slightly. "I didn't expect to see you again." "I needed to find you," Arthur said, stepping closer. "After you left, I realized that I had been living in a bubble. You opened my eyes to so much. About life, about connection, about what really matters." Eloise looked at him with a mix of surprise and skepticism. "And what is it that matters to you now, Arthur?" "Helping others," he answered, his voice steady. "I want to make a difference. I want to help mothers like you find stability, find hope. I want to create something meaningful." For a moment, Eloise was silent, processing his words. The children, who had been watching intently, resumed their activities, but Arthur could feel the weight of her gaze. "Why should I believe you?" she finally asked, crossing her arms, a hint of defiance in her tone. "You're a millionaire. You have everything. Why should you care about us?" "Because I didn't have everything, Eloise," Arthur replied, his voice earnest. "I had wealth, yes, but I lacked purpose. I lacked connection. It wasn't until I met you that I understood what true wealth means. It's about the impact we have on others, not the money in our bank accounts." Eloise's eyes softened, but there was still a flicker of doubt. "And how do you plan to help? You don't know what it's like to struggle, to fight for every little thing." Arthur took a deep breath, remembering the faces of the mothers he had met in his search, the stories of survival and resilience that had left imprints on his heart. "I may not know what it's like to live in your shoes, but I can offer resources. I can connect women to job opportunities, provide housing support, and create a network of hope. Together, we can build something that lasts." Eloise studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "And you want me to join you in this project?" "Yes," he answered, his heart pounding. "I want you to be my partner. You understand the struggles better than anyone. You have the passion, the drive. I believe we can make a difference." Eloise looked around the room, her gaze landing on the children who were now fully engrossed in their craft, their laughter filling the air once again. "You realize this will be hard work? It won't be easy." "I know," Arthur replied, a determined glint in his eyes. "But I'm willing to put in the effort. I want to learn from you, from the women who need our help. I want to give back in a way that truly matters." Eloise's gaze met his once more, and this time, there was a flicker of something else of hope. "All right, if you're serious about this, we can start by reaching out to local businesses and organizations that can help us." Arthur's heart soared. "Absolutely. We'll create a plan, build a community, and bring people together." As they spoke, the laughter of children surrounded them, blending with the sounds of inspiration and purpose. In that moment, Arthur realized that he was no longer just a successful businessman. He was part of something much larger than himself. Together with Eloise, they would open the doors to possibility, creating a future where love and compassion triumphed over despair. "We'll call it the Gate of Hope," he suggested with a smile. "A place where people can come together, share their stories, and find the support they need." Eloise smiled, a genuine smile that lit up her face. "I like that. It has a nice ring to it." As they began discussing the logistics, the children resumed their activities, their laughter echoing around them, a reminder of the joy that could be found even in the most challenging circumstances. Arthur felt a sense of belonging wash over him, a feeling he had longed for in the cold, sterile halls of his mansion. In that shelter, surrounded by laughter and the promise of a new beginning, Arthur Prescott discovered that the true riches of life lay not in wealth, but in the connections we forge, the lives we touch, and the hope we nurture. And as he and Eloise began to craft their vision for the future, he knew that together, they could change the world, one life at a time.